Thank you for attending, those of you who have. Yeah, I'm Councillor John Whitby. I'm taking the chair this evening because, well, we'll do apologies, but Councillor Lind has given her apologies, and there are a few others. Want to go through them?
Yes, I do. Councillor Lind, Councillor Pandy, Paul Anderson, Gloria Osei Bonsu, Andy Smith, Tracy Churchill.
And are there any other apologies that anyone's aware of? No? Okay. Done. Okay. There's no late items to be introduced. Declarations of interest. I'll just give my usual one, but it's not really impacted on this one. But I'm a Derby City Council foster carer. Any other declarations of interest? No. Okay. Good. I'm going to fly through this. Right. There's three sort of substantive items this evening, and the first of which is the Household Support Fund, which I've been looking forward to for a while, and that's Bernard.
Yes.
So you're going to talk us through this presentation, Bernard?
I'd like to, Chair, if that's possible.
Yeah. Have you got the technology?
That's the possible bit. Got schooled on this 10 minutes before you came in. We shall see. It's looking good, Chair.
Wonderful.
Shall I start?
Yes, please. Yeah, yes. Thank you.
I don't mind taking questions at any stage of the presentation. Household Support Fund 3, Chair, is cunningly the third of the household support funds. This particular one runs from the 1st of October last year to the 31st of March in a few weeks' time. Okay. We, as Derby City Council, received funding of 2.224 million, which is exactly the same as we had for HSF 2 and HSF 1. There are a small number of requirements attached to HSF 3, things we have to do, which I will point out as I go through the design here at Derby, which is what I want to do now, because it's basically a discretionary board. Within the parameters, you get to set up the scheme based on what you consider to be your priorities. So what we've done in Derby is identified three components. The first one was free school meal vouchers. We're looking to spend, when we did this back in September, late September, Chair, that was 1.1 million essentially. Come onto the details of these shortly. The online claim form is a requirement. There is an expectation that residents of the city have an option to apply for financial support online. And back in September, we suggested this would be almost £600,000. And then new to each of these households, to this particular household support fund, was the concept of creating a network of community organisations that would be able to represent the communities better and reach those better than we've been able to before. And I'll come on to that in more detail. And again, that was £500,000, which left us with a balance, Chair. We do have some small overheads to run this scheme, which I'll touch on, but essentially there's the fraud team and housing benefit teams, where we're taking existing staff away from activities that need to be carried out. So what we're doing with those two amounts of money is actually buying in contracted resource, basically. And then we also paid a small amount of money to Community Action Derby to manage the community network part of the scheme, leaving us with a small balance. We have yet to hand money back to government, and we won't be starting with this one either.
Good.
So when we get to the 31st of March, we will have spent everything and be able to audit that. But we are also we did expect in last September to receive a credit of £144,000. So when we issue vouchers and they expire, we get the money back so that we can recycle it and put it back into the pot.
That's okay. Good.
Okay, so that's the structure, financial structure of our scheme. What I'd like to do, Chair, if I may, is move on to the individual components, explain what they are, give you a brief update.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay. So preschool meal vouchers I sent to, we have 100 schools who distribute vouchers to their pupils and families. We could not do this without those 100 schools. It's a simple fact. And what they are distributing for the length of HSF3 are voucher codes that are worth £20 per pupil per week. Food vouchers.
Yeah.
So if we just take that very first line, which is October, 13,900, as Joe will tell you, that's a bigger number than it used to be. And is getting bigger, as we would expect every time we go out at a half term. We're now up to 14,200. So 13,900 vouchers were sent out before the October half term, which is £278,000, 69,500 meals. We essentially, as a that particular element, that very first one in October, expired on the 6th of January, Chair, because vouchers have 3 months.
So what's increasing? Number of children or number of children who hit the threshold?
Number of people who are on free school meals.
So,
It's increasing.
yeah, so there's more people in poverty. That's what we're saying. Well, not poverty.
It would indicate that they need some financial support. Yes.
Yeah.
So if we go to school A, it would have been 100.
I'm saying it's not necessarily
An increase
in children. It's the families that are
more than likely.
Yeah.
So just going back to that first distribution in October, 11,714 were redeemed, which was 84.3%. So we'll have got that balance back to reinvest in the scheme. That forms part. So you can see the numbers for December, and February went out to the schools on the 3rd of February in preparation for next week's half term. This works really well, and that's down to the relationship between the council and each of the 100 schools. Are there any questions on that, Chair, before I move on to the next bit? Councillors?
Not from me. Anything else? Okay.
The second element is the bit we are required to provide, which is an online claim form. We initially were suggesting we'd allocate a budget of £588,000. I'd like to just draw your attention to that line, energy rebate grant. What we were able to do, Chair, is that was another grant that was running, which we were not going to fully, it wasn't fully taken up. So we transferred the money into this scheme, this element of this scheme. So we actually had an allocated budget of £632,490. So this grant position was at 1 o'clock last Friday, where in essence, the point number 7, which is paid, we paid out 90.5% of the grant. We still have 6 weeks to go. 5,522 awards were made, and the redeemed value, second line in yellow, highlights that 91% of that money redistributed had actually been used, which is good work, actually. Key points to note, Chair? Sorry.
Well, it's just this is the bit that I'm a bit unsure about. So is this just? I mean, what does it cover? Clearly, energy.
No, when it comes, sorry, I beg your pardon. I skipped over that on the grounds that I think, because I know it, everybody does.
Yeah, well, yeah. I really am a bit clueless with this.
Right, so voucher codes these are paid out in voucher codes. So if you are a household with children under the age of 19, and you're successful in your application, you will get £120. Though that £120 can be spent at any one of 9 supermarkets. 9. on a range of anything, really. The only two items that are generally restricted are tobacco and gambling, which would be the lottery. Okay.
But that's different to this bit. That's the free school meal vouchers, isn't it?
Both vouchers, Chair, are shopping vouchers. The reason I mentioned energy rebate grant is because we took some money out of that completely separate grant because we weren't going to spend it, and we were allowed to transfer it into this scheme, which we are going to use. We have used £44,500 by distributing more vouchers.
Okay.
Yep. So it's £120 if you are a family with children under the age of 19. It's £100 in vouchers if you are a couple with no children, and it's £80 if you are a single person. So if you receive one of these vouchers, you then choose which of the 9 supermarket chains you want to go and redeem the vouchers at. And essentially, Chair, it's an e-gift card. So you use it until you run out of the funding.
Okay.
So key points to note for this particular part is of the scheme is that the average number of days from a successful application to an award is 3.4 days. We aim at 10 working days, so doing too badly there. All those 5,522 vouchers that have been paid, Chair, 3,056 families have benefited from that, which covers 6,486 children. 2,326 of those households are single parent families. Out of all of this slide, I think those 3 points are quite vital.
Sorry, Chair, can I just ask a question?
Yeah,
I'm just wondering whether you've got any breakdown in terms of where in the city.
yes, but I don't have it.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see that.
Yeah.
If you can send it separately.
I would.
Yeah.
We'll have to wait till the scheme closes.
Yep.
And then I can do that. But yes, we can. We clearly do check to make sure people are living in the city. So there are household residency checks, which is why we pay the fraud team to check every single one of the claims to this scheme. So we've got to make sure that they live in the city. We also make sure that those applications who say they are in receipt of a qualifying benefit, we check to make sure that is the case as well, which is why we pay the housing benefit team some money to carry out those checks, Chair. As of last Friday, 854 claims had failed those 2 checks, one of those 2 checks. And we're forecasting the scheme to close probably at the end of next week.
Okay, so the money that isn't redeemed, we plough back into HS4, HSF4,
no,
is it? Oh, no.
3.
Oh,
because we've got to spend, if we've got any money, we have to spend it by the end of the current scheme, which is the 31st of March.
Okay.
So if some of the money isn't spent from the half term money that goes out, is it too late for it to come back in because the scheme ends?
There's a possibility, which is why we have to be agile. Yeah.
Okay.
So
how do we get rid of it then?
Distribute it fairly. What we are doing this time, and this decision was made after this slide deck was sent out, is that there is a significant increase in the demand for discretionary housing payments, which is rent support and support with rent shortfalls, support with rent deposits, and support with the cost of moving home. To the extent where the housing benefit team had suspended processing DHPs because they'd used all of the government grant. So we've took £150,000 out of this and put it into the DHP pot so that they can recommence processing support with rent. That was what we've done this time.
I think that's good. Can't think of any reason why it isn't good. I mean, it's got to go back into families that need it desperately. So
we may have some more at the end, as you quite rightly say, Councillor. There might be some money coming back from current activity, and then we have a choice as to where we put it. We could because this particular element will run out next week, there's clearly demand. We might actually decide, if we've got some expired credits, to put it in here, into the online form, to keep it open for a few more weeks into March. That's a possibility. Or we might distribute some more vouchers to the school. The decision makers on that, Chair, are the designated delegated approvals, which are the Cabinet member for Children and Young People and the Strategic Director for Children. Well, actually for Peoples, actually. So we have some choices, and we always consider which is the best for the money we've got available, and then we make sure it happens before the 31st of March in this case.
And then there'll be a fourth sort of incarnation of this, which will cover May, presumably, May half term. Is it going to carry on?
Yes, in the November, well, the November budget last year, Chair, committed to 2 more rounds of household support fund, both for 6 months. So there'll be one for the 1st of April till the 30th of September. And then there will be another one from the 1st of October this year to the 31st of March next year. And the indications are, Chair, that it's going to be exactly the same amount of money. We wait and see.
So that's the problem. Yeah. Less and less value every time. Any questions for anyone?
Yeah, just one further question, if I can. It's called the online claim form. Is it only available online, or is it possible to apply and manually, if you like? And do they?
You've been reading the presentation, haven't you, Councillor?
No. It's all original thought.
We have to clearly be very careful about supported access. So there is what we call a trusted referrer network, so that we have a number of organisations across the city, 32 of them. We also have council services, of which there are 21, who the requirement is that they are currently working with a person and can therefore refer them into the scheme without the person needing to do that. So that's one way. The online form itself does enable somebody to apply on behalf of somebody else, like a family friend or a neighbour. Yeah, so you could apply on my behalf.
Yeah.
We do have appointments in place at the council house that people can come in, and some of my staff will sit there and fill that form in for you, with you. And each of the community network locations, which I'll come on to in a minute, of which some of those 32 are, also have access to the household support fund.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Certainly the highlight for me, one of the highlights for me, is the community network, the third element that we put in place. And it just continues, it extends the role of partnership working across the city. So what we've got is 48 organisations across all of the 17 wards have signed up to the community network. The community network means that they will provide a warm space, a hot drink and a meal, but also provide mediated access, if that's the right word, for financial support, as well as all the ancillary and very useful benefits of health and well-being, and literally just being in a room with other people who are in similar situations to you. So we split the £500,000 between £300,000 to allocate to each of these organisations. We allocated 196,000 back in December, so we've got some left. And we've just agreed in the second tranche this week that another 11 organisations would come on board. So we still, Chair, have £50,000 left, which we may then move back to the online form to say that's how we'll carry the form on into March, if that makes sense.
Okay.
What also came, so those 48 organisations, soon to be 59, have access to 2 financial support forms. The existing Household Support Fund 3, which if you look here, 369 applications to that scheme have come from the warm welcome hubs. In other words, we would not have seen these people if they hadn't have presented themselves to these hubs. Just, it is good. It really is cracking stuff. And they also had an energy form, and that energy form gives them a voucher, again, dependent upon the configuration of the household. So if you are a household with children, that's £60, and it's your energy or cash voucher, depending on how you top up. If you are a couple, then it's £49, and if you're a single person, it's £40. Okay, so where we're at here is that at last Friday lunchtime, 1,514 energy referrals had been made, and a further 369 household support fund referrals, making about £117,000 of referrals with 6 weeks to go. Okay. Just really quickly, that's 2 points. We have paid 1,043 of those 1,500 to the tune of £54,500 as of last Friday. Not on this slide, but I did do the work over the weekend to work this out. 657 children benefited from the households that have received this money so far.
Well,
so what I wanted to do, Chair, at the beginning of this short presentation, tell you what our scheme is like here in Derby, explain the components and give you the 3 components and give you an update explaining how the interaction between them does actually work. Yeah. I don't have anything else to add unless I'm answering questions.
Got any more questions though? Yeah, it would be helpful to get the information that Councillor Bonson mentioned, the whereabouts the money is sort of going in a sense, if that's possible. Obviously, when it's done, we've got it. And I don't know whether whether there's any ongoing discussion with government about do we actually get this to reflect, inflation, etc. Because I suppose £20 now is very different to £20 3 years ago, isn't it? I presume that's just going to be it, isn't it? Let's face it, £20.
This is the third scrutiny I've presented this to. It's come up in the 2 previous ones for obvious reasons. I'm sure there are representations from the LGA. I know there are. I don't know if they're going to be successful or not. I don't know. But indications in November, Chair, budget in November was exactly the same amount that we received in HSF 2 and 3.
Okay.
I guess our job, Chair, is just to make sure whatever money we get
goes
to the people that need it most.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like the fact that we'll just make sure nothing gets lost and diverted to whatever sort of cause is most, I suppose, pressing. Certainly back that, sure we would. Yeah, okay. So, recommendation is to consider the presentation. We've seen that. The only other thing I'd like to recommend is that we get the information about where the vouchers are being targeted and spent, etc. When that is available.
Certainly.
Brilliant, thank you.
Sorry, Chair, if we can include in that the sort of distribution, but also if there's an element of a concentration of vouchers that are issued but not redeemed. If there's a particular area where it's
it's an interesting question because we send voucher codes to the schools, which form the majority of the voucher codes that are issued, 56,000 of them. We don't know who they're allocating those voucher codes to.
Right.
And we don't do that because we don't get into the information governance piece. And they know their families significantly better than we do. So I can't do it for those, but I can certainly do it for the other 2 schemes.
But I don't suppose it's going to happen if there's a school that just returned 50% of the money, and then
they come back in and we redistribute them.
Yeah, but
you'd know that
there was an area at least where they weren't being redeemed.
Redeemed
I
for
see
some
what you're saying.
reason,
Yes.
for some
Yes.
reason,
Yeah.
yes.
Point, yeah.
But I mean, I can't,
Yeah.
I can't quite imagine it being quite as stark as that. But there may be the odd school where there's a lot less being deemed off you.
We certainly know, I won't show you, but we certainly know for each of the 100 schools how many voucher codes we've issued and how many have been redeemed at any one time.
Yeah.
So therefore, you're absolutely right. Providing the school only has pupils in their catchment area, we can identify.
Yeah.
On the basis that you said, yeah.
Might be interesting.
Okay. Right. Yeah. Thank you very much. That's really, really
you.
good. Thank you for it. But yeah. Well done, Marcus Rashford, and it's a good scheme, and we're grateful it's there, and just wish it would be twice as valuable. Anyway, thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. Moving on to the annual report for educational outcomes. That's it. That is.
So I've not got a slideshow. I didn't realise. I've just got the.
It's not
Yeah.
obligatory. It's not
Right.
obligatory.
Okay. Just got the report. Just before I go through it, the couple of sort of words of caution, I suppose. The first is the biggie is the impact of COVID, and because schools were still experiencing significant absence in the autumn term of 2021 and the beginning of the spring term of 2022, and particularly staff. It was the staff absence that made such a huge difference to the experience of the children. We've got quite an uneven picture across the city and indeed across the country, where some schools had considerable difficulty with child absence and staff absence, and some schools less so. So it makes it quite difficult to sort of make the usual judgments. And the other thing I would say is that in some cases the assessment system changed in the in between, particularly in early years. Before COVID, there was one framework, and by the time we came out of COVID, there was another framework. So even Ofsted are being incredibly cautious in terms of comparing 2019, which was the last set of published results, and 2022. But nevertheless, you still get a little bit of a picture of what's going on. There'll be 2 or 3 places where I change numbers slightly, and that is because the numbers were before the results were validated in some cases, and to be fair, Key Stage 4 still isn't. So there's a slight tweak as the machinery of checking nationally has included some children and not others. But again, it will be nothing that is of particular significance. So in terms of what I've provided, I've just sort of started at the beginning. I've talked a little bit about the impact of absence, so I won't dwell on that particularly. I will mention the opportunity area, which is over now, but certainly there are some schools who really took advantage of some of the supported programmes that were available in the opportunity area. And in Key Stage 2, I'll just point to a little bit of impact of that. We don't know exactly what's going to happen in the sort of sequel. We believe that the original plans have been sent back by the DfE, and we're still waiting to see what they are. But we do know there'll be a focus on reading, and we do know there'll be a focus on attendance and writing, believe. So, you know, the work goes on. Just to sort of point out that of the schools and academies in Derby, we do work very, very well with all of them, whether they be academies or LA schools, but there are at the moment 35 local authority maintained schools, and of those 35, 33 of them are judged good or better at the moment, and that is still the case. And then the other 2 are currently judged RI. and we are hoping for inspections soon for those two.
It's absolutely amazing. This. I was just staggered when I saw that. And I thought that's so impressive. That's 94%, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
Good or better. Unbelievable. So yeah, I mean, whoever needs to be congratulated for that, then it's just
Schools, isn't it? But
well, the schools
we know.
and all the support that goes with it. It's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. So if I sort of begin with early years, and obviously you've got some detailed commentary there, but I think the important thing there to note is that this is where the assessment framework has changed considerably. And one of the differences in Derby, the schools were invited to be pilot schools and to have a go at the new framework a year early. And in some parts of the country, quite a few schools chose to do that, and in Derby only 2. So we didn't have the same practice as some other parts of the country. But obviously the COVID, the impact of COVID is the main issue here. We got like 62.9% achieving the good level of development, 65.2% nationally, and we think we're doing all right in terms of early years. We're not concerned at the moment in terms of that particular measure. I'll just pause in case anyone wants to move on.
Anything? Yeah.
Yeah, can I just clarify the figures are taken then? Are those from nursery placements within schools and academies?
Yes, so it won't be the nurseries because this is the end of the reception year. Although clearly nurseries contribute, but no, it's the schools that have got the reception classes. So infant schools, primary schools and special schools.
So true early years, preschool isn't included
No,
in.
there are no outcome measures for anything before reception. Other than Ofsted inspections, I suppose.
Yeah, that's still, there's always Ofsted.
Okay. So the next, I'm going up in order of age. So the next thing that happens is the phonics test, and there is a phonics test at the end of year 1, and there's another one very similar at the end of year 2. And the idea is that at the end of year 1, you get a good sense of how well you're doing, and the goal is that you've nailed it by the end of year 2. So just sort of looking a little bit there, we've done a lot of work in Derby on this. Ofsted are very, very interested in reading, and they're very interested in early reading and that systematic synthetic phonics approach, which is a sort of logical ordering of the teaching of the phonic sounds through the year. There are schemes that the DFE validate, and the vast majority of our schools now use a validated scheme, but they don't all. Some of them make up their own scheme on their head be it, but if they manage to get good outcomes, then that wouldn't be a problem. It would be a problem if their outcomes were concerning. So we've got a lot of schools on Read Write Inc now, but not all of them. There are other schemes as well that are published. We're pleased with phonics. You can see there has been a fall. There's been a fall nationally, and there's been a fall locally. Because you can imagine these are very young children, and if you think when we had the lockdowns, you know, those children were deprived, if you like, of that sort of stimulation and that teaching at quite a formative age, both locally and nationally. But in terms of the end of year 1, we've fallen to 74, and nationally it fell to 75. We're close. But you can see that for the end of year 2, we're matching with national, and given how Derby compares in terms of deprivation to other local authorities, that explains why we've got that 72nd ranking. So we're pleased with phonics. We think we've managed to sort of hold it enough, and now people are really putting everything they've got into getting those year ones up to the standard by the end of year 2. So I'll just pause a moment. Case.
Pretty positive, to be honest. I'm pleased with the phonics. We're more or less right on the national average, aren't we? Which,
yeah, we were slightly above it in 2019, so we're a little irritated, but you know.
You said at the start about COVID, and I get that, COVID's had an effect on all sorts of things, but I suppose it would have had an effect on all schools all over the country. And I mean, how do we know that our recovery from COVID was harder hit than other areas? You know what I mean?
Well, we don't have figures that would indicate that COVID was worse in Derby than
I mean,
anywhere else.
Well, I think the implication at the start was, I don't know, some schools didn't get back to normal as quickly as some.
It's patchy across schools, because some schools had a lot more COVID in them than others. I mean, Spondon, for example, was existing in glorious isolation for ages. I just assume nobody went in or out of Spondon because they just didn't seem to be getting COVID.
That's because they stopped the bus.
Well, you know, it could be, but eventually COVID reached Spondon, I have to say, but not in the earlier waves. So it was just strange, and because I was working very closely with Dr. Dewis, and we were having those regular, weekly meetings. At some point, we were tracking it around the city. We knew where it was, and it was moving. But there were some parts. Littleover had it very bad indeed. Whereas Allistory less so.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. I appreciate it. Just trying to get my head around why COVID. Everyone had COVID, but I suppose some places had it much worse than others.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, some of the inner Normanton areas, there was, and we also had an issue there that some families would not be vaccinated.
Yeah.
So it did make a difference, but it's a reason. It's not an excuse.
Yeah.
But, we were the other thing that we have noticed is this, despite everything, and I'm going to contradict myself because I said we shouldn't compare, but some schools actually did better in 2022 than they did in 2019, despite everything, in terms of they'd honed their approaches and they were actually better teaching phonics in the later years. But I think 2023 will be interesting because schools largely have stabilised now.
Right.
Key stage 1. So what happened nationally for key stage 1, and that's why I've put that little small font thing from The Guardian. COVID was worse for writing than it was for reading and mathematics. And the theory there, because the children were engaging with the sort of remote learning, and a lot of families feel they're fine at reading with their children, and a lot of families feel they're fine at adding up with their children. But the actual physical act of writing, the children weren't holding a pen or a pencil and doing that extended writing the way that they would have been if they'd been in school. And nationally, that was the area that plummeted the most. And Derby is the same as everywhere else. So in reading, you can see we've got the 63 for the expected standard in reading, and 67 is national. Then we've got writing, 53 compared to 59, and you can see that's quite a lot lower both nationally and locally. And then mathematics, actually, 66 compared to 68. So that's sort of almost there in terms of what's happening there.
Mathematics is really similar. Quite a big drop in the other two compared to national. If you've got any sense of why that might be.
In terms of mathematics, most schools now buy in a scheme. There's a bit like the phonics scheme. There's a small number of very well respected mathematics schemes, and if you follow one of those schemes in a fairly faithful way, it does the curriculum thinking for you. It does everything in the right order. They're not perfect. You'll see in the Key Stage 2 commentary, we found that there was an area of maths that was missing in one of the schemes that we've now pointed out and corrected. But largely, I'm thinking schemes like White Rose in particular, it's just a very, very secure, steady scheme. And I think that probably has the impact of that is starting to show. Whereas the reading, we're still picking up that variation. There isn't the same steady scheme. And say the writing, I think it's just that the children weren't writing.
I guess because they weren't anywhere, were they? But they were still dropped a bit. That's the frustration that we seem to have dropped in relation to everyone else a little bit.
We've dropped more than
More.
We've largely dropped more. I don't know whether you were councillors at the time, but when we started to do this work, round about 2015, Derby's position was dire.
Yeah, no, I was then.
We're not back there, but we've slipped back.
No, fair enough. Yeah, I appreciate. I know. Yeah, we have come from a pretty low place.
Key Stage 2. So Key Stage 2. This is where I think I'm just gonna change a few numbers in a bit. So Key Stage 2, you've got test for reading. You've got test for mathematics, and then you've got the teacher assessing for writing. And similar to Key Stage 1, where it's all teacher assessment, we put a lot of work into training teachers, and also we sort of oversee moderation, and a couple of people in my team will visit a sample of schools each year and just check that they're proceeding correctly. So in terms of the reading, writing, maths collectively at expected standard, you've got Derby 53 and National 59. Now, back in 2019, we were not quite getting to the national the way we were in the phonics and the Key Stage 1. We've kind of had a wave of improvement coming through for the younger children. It hadn't quite reached Key Stage 2 in 2019, and you can see it's still not reached Key Stage 2. But 53 compared to 59, we've got some work to do there. In terms of the reading, so it's broken down now. We've got 69 compared to 75, and I've also picked out the progress score. The progress score is actually lower than 2019. Now, I think there's probably two reasons for that. One is because there was a national improvement in reading that Derby didn't mirror. But secondly, if you think that the Key Stage 1 has been improving, so the children are coming from a higher point, if Key Stage 2 then don't sustain it, it shows in the progress. So my view is that the big work now is Key Stage 2. I'll just keep going. The paragraph that's closest to the end, where it says those schools these programmes, these opportunity area programmes, we had some very significant programmes that worked on reading. And what we noticed was that the schools that had done 1 year's worth of those programmes, they declined, but at a lesser rate. The schools that had done 2 years worth of those programmes actually saw an improvement in their attainment. So we haven't shared this with schools yet, but there's clearly something there about that commitment to those programmes and that learning that some did, but it wasn't compulsory, so they didn't all do it. So that was the reading. In terms of maths, there's a slight change to the numbers. The national, I thought it was 72, but now it's been validated, it's 71. So the nationals come down, ours is still okay. So our maths was 67 compared to national 71. That, you know, that maths is a bit stronger relative to the national. And I think that's the reason. I'm fairly sure that's the reason. And then in writing, again, I've got a small change. The national is 69, not 70. So our writing 65, below 69. And we've sort of fallen in terms of progress as well.
So can you just say who runs those PSG programs that have obviously made a big difference?
Well, they finished now, but they were run by one of the multi-academy trusts. And they were commissioned using opportunity area money to run those training programmes, and the opportunity area attempted to identify schools that would benefit from it and nudge them and urge them to do those programmes. So
this new incarnation of opportunity areas, whatever it's called, I mean, is it going to come with a similar amount of funding or not? Okay.
No, it's I think it's 100,000 in total. And that's to work on reading, to work on attendance, to work. It's peanuts.
And what was the previous scheme?
Well, I don't know. Do you know how much money it was?
Like in millions or?
Yeah,
Millions.
Yeah.
100,000. Okay.
Levelling it up.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
The only thing is we've learned now, and if schools choose to benefit from that learning, there's every indication that there's some good stuff there.
Yeah, but who's gonna run them? Who's gonna run these things? We haven't got the capacity to run these, have we? We need a lot more staff.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I'm just.
No, don't. I say we do run training. We run a lot of training, but we haven't got the capacity to do that kind of reach. So.
Presumably, once upon a time, we would have done. I mean, I presume the team is now what?
The team shrunk every year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it will shrink again. I mean, you know, as we said earlier, it'll be a bit smaller again for the next academic year. That is the direction of travel, isn't it?
Well, very much regrettably, because it's not helpful for anyone at all. Yeah, I think it's a terrible move.
I'm not sure I know this for a fact. The DFE was surprised at the level of analysis that we do. I mean, perhaps one of the things that we do and that we've begun to share with schools, you can actually identify from the Idachi index the level of socio-economic deprivation inherent in the pupils in each school. So you would expect largely that the schools that have got the least deprivation tend to have the highest attainment in these tests, and largely they do. And the schools that are the most deprived tend to have the weakest attainment. But one of the things we've noticed, we've kind of done a league table of attainment and a league table of Adachi. And there are some schools that are ridiculously high compared to where they should be. And equally, there are schools that are low compared to where you would expect them to be. So what we've started to do is celebrate the schools that are punching above their weight and poke the schools that might be feeling, oh, we're all right, but actually they're not all right. And the DFE were quite surprised that we did that level of analysis. I don't know why they were surprised, but they were surprised.
Yeah.
Are you able to identify those that are punching above their weight, whether that's down to leadership in the school or whether that's down to the schemes that they're using?
No, we've not gone into that sort of level yet. At the moment, we're still skirting round, indicating, you know, that there's work to be done. It's probably a combination. It's probably a combination. But it is interesting.
Yeah,
and some of the schools that were on the DFE list as problem schools, we've been able to say they're not a problem school. You need to look in a slightly more sophisticated way.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Moving on to Key Stage 4, this is a much sunnier picture. There's been a lot of work done in Key Stage 4 over the period of the opportunity area, and I think it's starting to show. So in terms of what we've got here, do you want me to give you a bit of an explanation of Progress 8 and Attainment 8, or am I telling Granny how to suck it?
Yeah, I don't know what it is, so I'm happy to look like an idiot and tell us, please.
Right, okay. So this is the latest in a range of convoluted iterations to measure school performance. So Attainment 8 is calculated, so it's the, as you know, grades now are numbers, so that makes it a whole lot easier to add up and divide. So you look at your English language grade number and double it. You look at your maths grade number and double it. You then move into what they call the EBAC bucket, and you have 3 subjects from the EBAC bucket, which could be sciences, computer science, history, geography, modern foreign language, 3 of those. And you have 1, you don't double those, you just have 1 of each of those 3. And then you have what they call the open bucket, which is everything else, or indeed overspill. You know, if you happen to have 4 subjects in your EBAC bucket, 1 could spill over into your open bucket, so you have 3 there. So that gives you 10 numbers, and then you divide by 10, and that's your Attainment 8 score. What they then do is, for each child, they compare their Attainment 8 score and their Key Stage 2 score with everybody else in the country that had that similar starting point, and then they work out from that whether they are making completely average progress, in which case their progress score is 0, or if they're making more progress than their counterparts nationally, in which case it becomes more and more positive, or less, in which case it becomes less. So half of the schools are positive, less, and half of the schools are negative. So being negative doesn't necessarily mean disaster. It just means you're in that lower half. But obviously being very negative is not a good thing. Being very positive is an extremely good thing. So that's like your Progress 8 score. So coming down halfway down the page, Progress 8, Derby School average has now improved to minus 0.14. We're now getting into the respectable range. You know, don't panic about the minus sign. Notice that it's only a little bit minus.
Yeah.
We're starting to sort of bunch round the middle. You can see nationally the results are, it should be 0, but it's to do with validation and all of this sort of stuff, so we don't worry about that. But actually that 99th ranking isn't bad at all for Derby. We're not satisfied, and I've already had a little nag at the heads, because the problem in Derby now is the open bucket. They're not their curriculum is not sufficiently responsive to the needs of low prior attaining children with special needs, whereas in other parts of the country, Ofsted say, beware the open bucket, because that's where most schools go very positive in their progress. In Derby, it's the opposite. We go very negative in our open bucket progress. And that is not to do with the quality of teaching, it's to do with the range of subjects that are on offer. So that was the case in 2019, and I had a nag at them then. It's still the case now, but a few schools have changed their curriculum, so it's not as bad as it was. But that is where the work is, as far as I can see. I thought Councillor Lind was going to be here when we had our pre-meeting. We didn't have the breakdown of SEN information, and we do now. So I have got those figures for SEN, and I can say that if children had no special need, their progress 8 was positive 0.03. If they were SEN support, it's minus 0.59. And if they had an EHCP, it's minus 1.51. And that is worse than national.
Sorry, so the minus 0.14 is the average of all of those, the non-SEN,
yeah, it's just everybody together, and then I've broken it down because I was asked. So if you wanted to get a sense of it, if you just think about your EHCP children in Derby, their progress score was minus 1.51, which is very negative. You'd expect that because, you know, particularly in some special schools, they don't enter the children for all of those examinations. So some of those buckets are empty, which is obviously going to affect the score. Nationally, the EHCP progress score was minus 1.33. So we are 0.2-ish lower. Yeah, so there is an issue. There is an issue. On attainment 8, we improved. You would expect that, otherwise the progress wouldn't have improved, but we've improved on the attainment 8. That's gone up by 1.4, so that's like 1.5 grades that's gone up, which is, you know, for the children involved, that's a significant improvement. Nationally, however, there was also an improvement, so we're still playing catch up there, but we're moving in the right direction. And then we move on to percentages achieving English and maths. So we've improved there. Nationally, it improved as well. I'll just tell you a little bit about this national improvement in a minute, because it isn't because everybody in the country's got better. And that's another reason why you've got to be a bit cautious. It's to do with what the exam board did. But anyway, you can see there's a breakdown of the English and the maths. What happened nationally over COVID is that in 2020 and 2021, the schools did their own assessment, and there were various forms of kind of moderation, but to be honest, it wasn't moderated. And what happened was that nationally, the results at GCSE went up and up and up because schools were marking their own homework rather than having any. And oddly, independent schools went up far more than state schools. But the overall effect nationally was that the GCSE results, your attainment 8 went up and up. And what the exam board decided to do was to bring them back in line with what results had been in 2019, but not to do it in one fell swoop, but to pick a midpoint to use as the sort of, when they do the bell curve, they try and make certain, you know, they make certain that you've got enough children in all the bits of the bell curve. So rather than bring the bell curve right back to the 2019, they moved it back towards 2019. And that explains why some of the improvement, both nationally and locally, will have taken place. Again, we need to wait till 2023 and then we'll know for sure. But we're pleased. And you can see EBAC as well. We've got a bit of an improvement there in terms of improvement in EBAC scores as well. That's because the government, right back from Michael Gove, wanted to encourage schools to enter children for those EBAC bucket subjects. So there's a bit of pressure on schools to get more children to enter those, hampered by the fact that there aren't enough modern foreign language teachers to go around. That's generally a sticking point. And then Key Stage 5, improving again. Key Stage 5 was the weakest key stage in 2019, so there's clearly been a bit of work that's gone on there as well. But it will be similar, it'll be the bell curve effect as well going on there as well.
So, $6 million question is how are we going to improve Key Stage 2 at least? I mean, so what's going to happen that's going to make a difference in the next sort of year, apart from this £100,000?
Well, it won't make a difference for next year because it's February now and they've not started doing anything with it yet. There will be some continuation of the impact of the training that not everybody, that some schools have experienced through the opportunity area. And there will be somewhat less COVID or flu or whatever it happens to be, Nova virus. I mean, there've been that many different things that have swept through schools, but there will be a slightly more stable school year, which ought to result in a better set of results. But what will make the big difference just is quality of leadership, isn't it, in the schools?
Okay. And support for schools obviously is I think it's particularly important. Yeah. And like I say, I'm just say again, the Ofsted 33 out of 35 is unbelievable. Yeah. Just because I'm curious, all the schools that aren't maintained or aren't local authorities maintained, what do you know roughly what the sort of their percentage of good or better would be?
I do know, but not off the top of my head.
I'd love to know.
But to be fair, some of the schools that got bad Ofsted judgments had to then become academies. So some of those schools have yet to have an Ofsted. Yeah,
but some of the outstanding ones have become academies because they've been outstanding as well.
Yeah.
It's swings around.
Yeah. I'm just saying it's a complex picture.
Yeah. I was amazed to see that many goods because it's not easy, is it? Let's face it, to get a good Ofsted, so that's outstandingly good.
Yeah. We've done a lot of work with them on curriculum, quality of education and curriculum, a lot of work. And my colleague and myself run an LA maintained heads network where we put a lot of training into curriculum and what that curriculum conversation would be.
So the role of the school improvement team has been extremely important. I mean, crikey, say it. It obviously has, hasn't it? You can see by the results.
I would like to think so. Yeah. So we have been busy.
It's just fundamental. Anyway,
but it is the schools. If it was as simple as somebody wafting through 3 times a year or whatever, then every school would be magnificent, wouldn't it? It's are they listening and what are they doing afterwards?
It's a range of things, presumably, but the schools most importantly. But it's clearly going to have a difference if they're getting excellent support from the local authority. Anything else to say or ask?
No, you asked my question about the percentage of schools. I'd be interested.
Oh, yeah.
Percentage of non-LA schools that are good or above. Yeah,
I can do that.
So that'd be really, really helpful. So if there's no more questions, the recommendations, noting the outcomes, we're recognising the I suppose that the progress certainly at Key Stage 1, phonics, 4 and 5.
5, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's certainly worth noting. I would also like to note, you know, the outstanding work done by the schools and the school improvement. It has to be a partnership to get these 33 goods. It really is remarkable. I think we should say it. Yeah,
Thank you.
Absolutely fantastic. Yeah, no, the opportunity area is now funded. Funding has ended, sorry, which is disappointing. And the replacement clearly won't really be a replacement. But there you go. So, okay. You can make something sensible out of that, can't you, when you see it? Basically, bigging up the school improvement team and our wonderful schools. Excellent, thank you, Joe. Right, we shall move on. Gamal.
Okay.
Back again for yet more front twos, but I've got 6 in it. I don't know if it's
Okay, if I draw out headlines in the report, and I know we've regularly before, of course, you know the journey. Thanks, Joe. In terms of the report itself, obviously, just to recap, the report will go to Council Cabinet on Wednesday, and members will consider in terms of the recommendations and their decision. So, brief recap: a consultation, of course, has taken place on post-16 homeschool discretionary transport around moving towards personal travel budgets for all eligible sixth form learners and with an improved independent travel training service. That consultation was run from September through until December, and Appendix 2 details the responses received through during that period. All the report outlines the council remains totally committed to providing discretionary travel assistance for eligible sixth form learners, whilst recognising there are opportunities to try and align our offer and discretionary travel with independent travel trainers. And of course, importantly, this links to the council's medium-term financial plan and the financial challenges for the council as well. The personal budget we know before from previous discussions around is a fixed amount of money paid to families in terms of using their home address. The table at 4.7 outlines the numbers, and I know we've talked about those before. Documentation is also attached within the document appendices. 4.9 outlines information around the 27% increase in the number of eligible pupils and how there's been a sort of shift in terms of expenditure on homeschool transport over the last year or so.
Can I just come in there, Gamal? So this is quite a rapid rise in 4.9, 5.5 million to 8 million. Yeah. I mean, is this not just because kids have generally gone back to school from following COVID, or is this a general progression from before COVID? I mean, COVID gets in the way of everything. I mean, it's so is that?
It's general progression.
Yeah.
During COVID, in order to keep businesses sustainable, we were as a council paying for homeschool transport anyway, 2% adjustment for fuel. But it's 2 factors really: a number of where the placements are made, increased education, healthcare plans and needs, and together with the transport market and sort of pressures within that space. So it's multifaceted.
Okay.
There's no one factor, and it's all correlates with the high needs block and the expenditure within that space as well. 4.10 outlines that the council currently supports 236 post-16 learners with discretionary travel, and 194 learners travel in taxis and minibus at a cost of 1.4. 4.11 outlines the 210 responses received, and 4.13 of course outlines that the majority of responses are not supportive of this change, and focus on concerns that young people may experience challenges around travelling independently to school, and that personal travel budgets may not suit everyone. 4.14 outlines the council recognises and understands that there may be some exceptional cases where a personal travel budget or ITT may not be appropriate. For example, young people have significant medical needs where they must travel with specialist medical support, professional support, or medical. 4.16 outlines the engagement with young people. Young people are generally positive around the opportunities for independent travel training when it's safe to do so, in terms of that preparation for adulthood. A number of public events held. 4.17 outlines that, where parents and families were saying the amount of the proposed personal travel budget may not cover the cost of travel assistance, and a number of other factors in that. So in summary, at 4.18, the responses received from parents raised some concerns and indicated they do not support proposed changes to the current COVID-19 travel system. Conversely, young people felt that independent travel training and the reduction of those budgets would offer some advantages and support them to promote increased independence for in terms of the recommendation of the Cabinet, we're considering 2.1 is to approve the providing personal travel budget payments for all eligible sixth form learners and families from September 2023, and the council no longer arranging taxi transport. 2.2 to note that taxi transport will only be arranged in certain circumstances in accordance with the criteria set out in the post-16 homeschool travel policy. And 2.3 note, subject to approval, the implementation of the revised policy will be on September 2023 to give learners sufficient notice of the changes. Chair, I pause there. Happy to take questions.
Yeah, any questions?
Well, I still have concerns about people who are part way through their post 16 and that they've had the travel arranged or whatever in the first year, and then they're going to get this budget for the second year, and why are we not phasing this in?
All right, so that everyone has 2 years of
a bit of notice, a bit of transition sort of time. I mean, I know that's not going to solve the budget problem, but
I suppose that's going to be quite a big implication, and that's the thing, financially. I can't get the money out of my head. That's the problem.
No,
We're under so much pressure, aren't we? It's a terrible situation. But I know what you're saying. That's a reasonable suggestion, rather than because it's 2 years for everyone, isn't it? Rather
I mean, has that been costed? Has it been looked at? Because it bothered me that there were no other options were considered.
I guess the difficulty is around, sorts of considerations being around the fact that, and again comes back into what does the legislation require local authorities to provide, and therefore it says facilitate and discretionary transport, and that's where a lot of councils have gone. But if you crudely look at it, if £1 million, 1.2 million is spent on post-16 transport over it, it's just not 2 years. Well, it will be over 2 years 12, years 13 in effect. So you could, if there's a similar number of pupils in each year, you then kind of continue with £600,000 rather than say expenditure in terms of that. And the only kind of observation on there is around the journey of possible changes will have been for a full academic year, as in the change might be coming, although I appreciate the point is making it easier in the sense that we as a council started this consultation in September 2020. So not that it's any easier, but it allows families to be aware that possible change is coming. So we're subject to consultation by September. And that's why the scoping of this actually started even earlier with local area send boards and send co-production group, which kind of started in its journey around February 2022. We remind them of that point and we want to get to so close to 2020. So it's difficult to know it is, but that's been the sequencing of that full academic year.
And I suppose the other, it's really around not considering any other option. The other option is that talking about the yearly travel proposed budget payments. Have they been looked at in terms of whether some people might be getting more than they need, and some people getting less than they need, and not sort of on an actual need cost basis?
Well, it's about 2/3 of what they were getting at the moment, isn't it? Not getting. Isn't it about 2/3 of the cost, the average cost?
Yes, it's certainly
They're going to
less.
get
I mean,
it.
yeah, I mean,
It's just a blanket approach.
It is a blanket
isn't it,
approach.
rather than more of a tailored
And some will be going further than others, etc., etc.
Yeah,
So it's
well, I mean, it's
cost.
stepped in that on that basis, but yeah, I feel that we perhaps haven't looked at all the options.
yeah, it's a difficult one. There aren't a multitude of options available, is the honest reflection. And the important bit is around what does the statutory guidance on the Department of Education require councils to do, and it requires some form of contribution towards families to facilitate attendance, and there's discretion on that level of contribution. And therefore that's where the options kind of remain. And of course, it becomes down to providing the financial position the council's in, and shift from to the £4 million transport expenditure for all sorts of reasons 2-3 years ago to 80.5 million across the piece, and that is and the variability around taxi transport.
Yeah,
And the options, I suppose, the other thing is trying to kind of get that connectivity with a much more enriched independent travel training offer. We're trying to get that cliff edge, that 95%, probably much higher, have been transported in taxis.
yeah.
Yeah. Then they get to the point of leaving, and the whole journey has been in a taxi transport. Not for 1 minute. You know, independent travel training isn't suitable to everybody, but it is, the offer is much more enriched with using transition to try and do training, independent travel training in terms of readiness. But you always do that with young people who are in years 9, 10, and 11. And of course, in certain cases, not possible based on distance. So children that are going in other places. But in summary, the discretionary element, for not a better word, around contribution towards travel and transport is within that 16 to 19 cohort.
I suppose if we said, oh, if they're going much further, we'd give them more money, but that's incentivizing them to some extent to go further out. We don't really want them to go miles and miles out of Derby to access education. Oh, I don't really want them to. I want them to be educated in Derby, or as near to Derby as possible.
There's a higher rate for 16 miles and beyond.
Oh, is there a high rate? Okay.
So it's almost based on mileage distance. If it's sort of 2 miles within the system, 2 miles within Derby, I guess, in terms of the home to school, and it's slightly higher. Nevertheless, you understand the point around that tailored mechanism.
Yeah, I do like the idea of not sort of forcing someone in the second year to suddenly do this. I can't Now you said it, I can't get away from it. I don't know whether, I know it's probably going to be too late after tomorrow. I presume it's going to cabinet, isn't it? But it would be interesting to know what the cost to that would be if we took all the second year kids out of the equation, so that everyone who ever accesses this personal transport budget is going in for 2 years. They only know that. That's all they know. They don't know a year of getting taxes and then a year of
They have the option.
budget.
Yeah.
I guess, Chair, if you're looking at 4.10 in the 94 learners, across the years 12 and 13, for argument's sake, are travelling in taxis at a cost of around 1.4 million, 1.48 million in effect. So if you were talking crudely around sort of 100 year 12, 100 year 13, you're around 700,000 is what the cost would be.
So what I was wondering what contingency plans we've got if we make this change and there is a sudden group of people who drop out because they're not able to get what options there are in terms of.
So certainly in terms of that element of sort of eligibility, as I've outlined, that exceptional criteria in effect is really now sort of in place.
That's not what I mean. What I mean is, once those changes happen, if we then find that there are existing pupils who are currently travelling, if they stop attending because they are now struggling to get there, what options are there? What mechanisms to find out what's going on, to see if there's anything that can be done? I just don't want us to end up with a group of people who were travelling in education, and then all of a sudden they're not, and us not to have thought, not to have some plan for what we might do about that.
Yeah, and there lies some of the difficulties in terms of it's in sort of in the pre-16 space as well, and in post-16 greater reference sense, parents' responsibility to ensure attendance. And I appreciate what you're saying. I'm not trying to play with words here, but it's kind of a family's responsibility to ensure the young person does attend sixth form provision, and we help facilitate that. But the responsibility around continuing post-16 education sort of is obviously sort of a family's responsibility in terms of that. Of course, post-16 is slightly different to pre-16 because that brings with it is a legal obligation that a young person is required to be in attendance. Therefore, there are other sort of aspects that are used in that space. But it'd be an interesting, but fundamentally, this is around government policy, DfE policies around facilitating that attendance. And these mechanisms, there's a question of what do you kind of say what facilitation is, but this helps with that facilitation because it's saying in that table that actually, hey, we're not going to arrange a taxi, but we are going to make a contribution to help families to ensure the young person can get to post-16.
And are we going to monitor so that we know in 12 months, 2 years time, we know whether there has been a difference, whether the kind of figures of attendance have dropped or not, so that to get some sense of whether there has been an impact on attendance?
Yeah, and I think some of that will be kind of what Joe's referred to within her area, and some of it could be within the stats that are in 4.10 around if there are 194 current post-16 learners. Well, what does that landscape look like around years 12, 13 to try and see? But as I say, the difficulty is around a huge demand of increase and trying to manage sort of finances trying to provide, and therefore looking at areas that you continue to focus on statutory services, whatever they are across the piece, as well as having to look much more carefully in that kind of difficult lens around where there's discretion and facilitation. Whether you agree or disagree, it's not that. It's around the predicament that all councils find themselves in. And that's why many councils, the Leicestershire being nearby here and others who are having to look at that, and everybody's primary school transport budget to be overspending because of all sorts of factors which directly correlate with SEND reforms and in the funding that's coming through on the SEND reforms.
I suppose what we could do is recommend that this sort of those figures come back to the boards. Give it a few months. Obviously, but it's going to come September, isn't it? So maybe early 24, it comes back to scrutiny to see whether people are still accessing education as they were under the previous scheme. I mean, and then I don't know if they're not, create a plan B. I don't know, but if everyone's going along swimmingly, then fine. And if that budget is stretching further, as the Derby Send Alliance sort of suggested, probably will, so they can get from A to B all year, then fair enough. There's lots of unknowns on there. That's the thing. I suppose it'd be good to know, whether it is having an impact on attendance. Obviously, as soon as we get any figures, do we get mid-year? Do we get how often do we get figures? Do we get term figures? Presumably.
Yeah. It's likely to. There's a settling period.
Yeah.
In terms of, I mean, certainly you would have thought by spring 24.
Yeah, spring 24. Yeah.
As the report alludes to, we are expecting significant appeals, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
I just thought a kind of benchmark starts to appear, but there are multiple factors as well around how many people actually want to go on to sixth form education, and is that continuing upward trajectory, which you think it will. But certainly it will give a guide around spring 24, when you're almost in the middle of the academic year, 23.
Yeah, and that'd be interesting to see how many have accessed it compared with in previous years, whether there's been a drop. So yeah.
Just a question: how is the payment paid? Is it just an annual? Or is it
no, it's in 3 instalments. Yeah.
So somebody did drop out of higher education, the payments will stop as well.
Yeah, so it'll be linked to continuing education, and I think the report maybe 3 instalments that it's paid to families.
Okay.
Do you want to make that recommendation?
I think so. That it comes back in, let's say, in March or something. Yeah, spring 24.
Does anyone use?
Oh yeah. I'm just anyone that second that, please. Yeah, no, Councillor
Keep
yeah. And then we'll have an idea about what's going on, whether people are accessing it, whether there's dropouts, whether we need to do something different. But yeah, it'd be interesting to know, I must admit. But yeah, I mean, even if we make a recommendation now, is it going to get seen by?
Yeah, I'll check with Karen. If I do just a brief minute and then do the recommendation, then it'll get to cabinet. It'll obviously have to be agreed by the chair, because it's a late item, so you just have to ask whether he'll take it or not. So
What, that recommendation?
yeah, we should wait.
But isn't that just like for us?
That's for us, isn't
So
it?
Us for
just
for this
okay,
board, yeah.
okay.
I don't think that needs to go.
Okay,
cabinet,
that's brilliant. Thank you.
Are you thinking of another recommendation?
Well, I don't know, because what, have you got one? I wrote about 3 different versions of it, but it all means the same thing. I mean, I don't know whether, for me, whether we can replace the saving. That's the thing. you know, it's regrettable. It's regrettable. Obviously, it's one of those things. It's like, if the council had another 20 million quid, or I mean, a fraction of the money we've lost over the last 13 years, which is hundreds of millions of pounds, we wouldn't even be considering this. It wouldn't be an option. But we're in that regrettable position of looking at sort of worst case scenarios, aren't we? And well, least worst options.
I suppose so long as we have an opportunity as a board to come back and potentially make recommendations, you know, if there are remedial steps that need to be. I mean, the phased approach, we've got to find, what was it, £700,000 to go for that sort of approach.
That's it. I mean, I'm agonising about changing them for £43,000 thing in the budget, but yeah, but if 700 grand, I mean, I don't know what you're going to stop to do that. So we're in a really difficult position, and with sort of regret, I think we are accepting of the position that the council finds itself in. I suppose there are, you know, some small positives. Some of the consultation was positive from a young people's perspective. You know, we're looking at crumbs, aren't we? But yeah, apart from that, I think it's regretful, but I don't think we're in a position to do anything significant about it, I'm afraid. Sound like giving in. There you go. I'm sorry. It's terrible. It's a terrible position we are in, and we've been for some years, but it just seems to be getting worse. You know, maybe a year and a half's time will stop, and we'll see. Right. Okay. Well, thank you, Gamal. Thank you for going through that yet again with us. It was just the work programme, and yeah, the work programme's almost done, isn't it? Is there anything else to add to, what is it, one more meeting we've got?
Yeah, 27th March.
Yeah, there was a few things on it.
Update on NHS dental early dental care, monitoring safeguarding practice, and Derby safeguarding children's board risk exploitation. And
wow. Okay, I'm interested. So, unless there's anything extra to that, I think that's okay personally. And we've got a date, haven't we, for the off-rolling?
24th.
24th. That's next week. Oh, over March. Sorry.
Sorry, February.
February. Yeah, I was going to say what was that?
February.
Yeah. Okay. And so we'll have a discussion about that if anyone else can make it. The off-rolling thing.
What's that? 24th
of February. So it's a week on Friday, isn't it? Is that right?
So yeah, it's. I can send you out an invite if you look. It'll be a virtual meeting.
Oh, if it's virtual, that's more likely.
And
what day of the week is that then?
I thought it was a Thursday.
Oh, okay.
It's Thursday. You've had it.
I thought it was a Friday, but I could be wrong. Is it 24th?
It's 24th.
24th Friday, yeah.
Oh, there you go. Should we just circulate an invite to the board?
Yeah, please. Yeah. Yeah. Unless there's anything else, we'll call it a day.
The meeting.
We'll end the meeting. Wonderful.